Good evening, councillors. Can I welcome you to the scrutiny panel. Let's get the right committee. Scrutiny panel this evening, governance and audit tomorrow. There are no practice evacuations planned for this evening, but if the alarms sound, please evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the high street, whichever is appropriate, etc. This meeting is being broadcast live over the internet on the council's website. It will also be available to be listened to afterwards. Discreet use of mobile phones and other devices is welcomed, but you are requested to set them to silent and not use the voice or camera flash functions. We may have a break at 7:30, subject to progress of the meeting. Introductions. I'm Councillor Dennis Willits, Lexton and Braeswick Ward, Chairman of the panel. To my right.
I'm Darius Laws, Councillor for Rural North.
Councillor Sue Lissymore, Prettygate Ward.
Councillor Sam McCarthy, representing Shrub End Ward.
Councillor Paul Smith, St Anne's and St John's Ward.
Councillor Mike Lilly, Old Heath, the Hive and Row Hedge Ward.
Councillor Lee Scordis, Old Heath, Hive and Row Hedge.
Richard Block, Chief Operating Officer, and here for the substantive item on peer challenge.
Richard Clifford, Democratic Services Manager.
Mel Rundle, Safety and Protection Manager and Senior Support to panel this evening.
And we have Councillor Adam Fox in the public gallery who will step forward to represent the Cabinet at the appropriate time. So item 2, substitutions. As far as I know, we're all here. No one's substituting, good. Urgent items, I'm not advised of any urgent items. Declaration of interest. Does anyone have a formal declaration of interest? There are no minutes to sign at this meeting. General, have your say. I see no one in the public gallery. Are there anyone online?
There is nobody, Chairman.
No one online, okay. Decisions taken under special urgency provision, there are none. Cabinet or portfolio holder decisions called in for review, there are none. So item 9, items requested by members of the panel or other members. Have we received any notifications of items to be considered this evening?
We have received no notifications, Chair.
Do any members of the panel wish to raise any additional items which we should consider for future consideration? So no items are raised under item 9. That takes us on to the only item of really substantive business this evening, and that is to consider Cabinet's response and their action plan to the Local Government Association's Peer Challenge Action Plan. In the absence of any members of the public listening in or in the gallery, I think we can be fairly brief because most of us will know what was the peer challenge, and many of us participated in it, and then the report was issued, and now we have an action plan. Are there any comments you would like to address to start off with before we get into the main business?
Thank you, Chair. Just a really brief reminder. I won't go into the details of the how the peer challenge works, but a reminder of the importance of the scheme in terms of it being the local government association's way of ensuring sector-led effectiveness and improvement, and that has never been so important at this stage, with some of the kind of the high-profile issues that have occurred in other councils. So this is a really important framework, and it's a really important process for you to review the action plan being proposed to respond to the peer challenge. Just to remind you, the peer challenge started with a position statement the council put together of the background and issues that we felt existed. Peer challenge obviously came in. It was a team of peers, including senior councillors and officers from other councils. They met 150 people across 45 meetings, and anything that appeared in the peer challenge report has to be go through a process called triangulation. They have to hear something 3 times for them to put it as an issue or to pursue it as an issue. So anything that's made it through as a key recommendation is absolutely something that we should be looking at. The report is appended, so hopefully you've had a chance to remind yourselves of the key recommendations, as is the proposed action plan. The plan responds to the key recommendations by the report. The eagle-eyed amongst you will have noted there are other words of advice within the peer challenge report, and they haven't been lost. I just want to emphasise that we have a far more detailed tracker with every kind of word of advice, if you like, that in the peer challenge report to capture that and ensure that we respond. But the action plan you have responds to what are the key recommendations identified by the peer challenge team. So those were the kind of the absolute key elements that we should be responding to. Now, and you are pre-scrutinising this prior to Cabinet actually receiving this action plan. So if you do have recommendations about any of the responses to those key recommendations, obviously as a panel you can make those recommendations through to Cabinet. And I see Councillor King's arrived, so he may also want to say a few words by way of introduction.
Yes, the late Councillor King. Do you wish to address any remarks to us? Give us any guidance on this matter before we kick off our scrutiny. We're always welcome to have your impartial advice on these matters.
Very kind of you, Chair. You press on and I'll contribute when I can.
Okay, thank you. There is a lot of subject material to be scrutinised this evening, although most of it falls into place, fits into place easily and appropriately. But we need some sort of process, otherwise we're jumping around from recommendation to recommendation, from the report to the plan. So with your permission, colleagues, what I suggest we do in terms of a procedure to get through the work this evening is that first of all, we just quickly skip through the report from the LGA and identify any issues which we believe should appear in the action plan, but have not. Now, we've heard the assurance that there is a more detailed log, but I think one of our value judgments is whether there are issues which should have appeared in the LGA response, or our response to the LGA, but have not. So that would be sort of stage one, and we don't need to read the report paragraph by paragraph. It's just a case of sort of skimming through and saying, are there significant issues which surprises the panel that they are not in the action plan. And then we've done that, we then move over to the action plan itself. And here the salient issues will be, are the projects well defined? Do we understand the scope? Do we agree with the scope? Are there target dates? Is there a realistic description of the work that will be carried out? And if we go through those one by one, then I think we should have covered the ground with the required degree of precision to be able to make a recommendation to whether we see this as all fitting together as a composite whole, or whether there are any issues on which we would need to draw Cabinet's attention. I mean, is that a reasonable way to proceed? There must be other ways of doing it.
Chair, just to remind you, we have the submission from Councillor Summocks as well, so we might read that first before you go into your debate.
Was this a general point, or does it pertain to a particular item on the action plan?
I think Councillor Summock's points are more general. So,
In that case, I will pause, always pause when told.
sorry,
to
I
do so,
just
by
couldn't wait to
Democratic
get to the
Services.
bottom, so.
And we could hear Councillor Suddock's view. He's not here to read them himself.
He's not, no.
Okay.
Okay.
Does this apply to Councillor Suddock's statement?
And no, it applies to the questions put forward by Mr. Chilvers, which I sent through to yourself and to Richard. He's a resident of ours. I just asked if they could be put forward as part of the review, that when the reviews take place into CCHL, could the questions that he asked be answered then and sent to him, rather than discuss them all here tonight? I take it you did see that.
Yes, I responded to Mr. Chilver's note. I felt it was more a matter for the Governance and Audit Committee's consideration of CCHL rather than scrutiny panel. This evening, one of the issues does dwell on Colchester Borough Homes and Colchester Commercial Holdings Limited, but this is a question of have the appropriate reviews been put in place rather than to our satisfaction, rather than what is the substance of those reviews or even findings of those reviews. I would certainly steer, unless he's here or unless we have a presentation from him, I would have preferred it to have defaulted to governance and audit rather than asking detailed questions here of the sort that he indicated in his email, if that's satisfactory.
That is, I sent the copy to Councillor Smith as well. So if you could do that, that'd be great. As long as Mr. Chilvers gives an answer and it's recorded, then we're happy as well.
So he has an unofficial answer from me. So I
Okay.
have no status. But
Okay, you should have, if you include that in me and that, then we wouldn't have to ask these questions now. So
okay.
okay, thanks.
So
Chair.
we're back to Councillor Suddock's statement to the panel.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a submission from Councillor Suddock. I would like to invite the scrutiny panel to request proper financial appraisals for all capital programme items as part of the peer challenge actions in item 10. We need proper appraisals for every investment, even if the objectives are social rather than commercial. Not woolly cost benefit analysis, but a hard-headed look at alternative ways of delivering the same results. For example, the Heart of Greenstone project is intended to revitalise the community, but financial analysis will tell us whether it is being done in the most effective way. Buildings are to be demolished and replaced, which is expensive and unkind to the environment. We need numbers showing what we have now, what we need to spend, and what we will have in the future. At the Northern Gateway Leisure Development, the council needs to be tracking the pre-let situation closely because we are taking the lion's share of the risk. How many tenants have signed up, and is an accounting provision needed in view of the financial distress at Cineworld? What does the appraisal look like now? If the news is bad, we need to know. Equally, we need to know that we are delivering our £21 million investment in new social housing efficiently. We are buying housing at market prices and incurring interest costs that now fall well short of the rent. It is financially unsustainable, and we need new approaches in new market conditions. And it is vital that these appraisals are properly scrutinised by councillors. The projects will affect the city for years to come, and confused appraisals will produce wrong conclusions. I've seen examples where no land cost has been included at all, which rather misses the point. And most dramatically, we found a £100 million error in the garden community appraisals, which, when corrected, sunk the two biggest completely. If the appraisals had remained confidential, the error wouldn't have been noticed and the council would have become further entangled in a wildly unrealistic project at West Tay. So proper financial appraisals, please, and proper scrutiny from councillors. And that's the end of the statement, Chair.
Thank you. With your permission, colleagues, I might suggest that when we get on to the second part of our considerations, the detailed action plans, Richard Block might perhaps address the issues or if it's thought to be political, perhaps the leader might address those issues as our understanding of the response to the LGA view on the capital programme. Although again, it is getting a bit on the detailed side for the balance of scrutiny that we are looking to achieve this evening. I think what Councillor Sunnox is talking about is more sort of the detailed appraisal of the individual projects and whether they're going to achieve what is required, as opposed to the overall plan of projects. So we'll park that for the moment and come back to it if that's in order. So let's kick off with a very brief review of the local government report. It's a detailed report. It contains lots of material. From our point of view, it's just a little difficult because they headed their analysis in 6 points: local priorities and outcomes, organisation and place leadership, governance and culture, financial planning, management, capacity for improvement and transformation, and organisation development. And so we have that on one axis, and coming out of that, we have a set of recommendations which sort of map onto their findings, but inevitably in some areas there is greater emphasis of what needs to be done and what needs to change and what needs to be reviewed than there are in other areas. But looking through the report, if we use the numbering for the original numbering for the report, page 9, very little there. Page 10, there was a recommendation that it's timely to review the authority's KPIs to ensure that they are relevant for the future. That appears nowhere in the action plan. Is that a matter which is being picked up, but is of sufficiently low priority not to need to appear in the action plan? I mean, is that a value judgment, Richard?
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely is being picked up as part of the revision of the strategic plan, as well as the fact that our key KPIs, as was debated within this committee last time we met, our KPIs need to reflect the new financial reality that we face over the forthcoming financial year, and we've committed to conduct a review of those, and indeed those proposed KPIs will come to this committee in March prior to being adopted. So absolutely it's being picked up. If the committee feels that needs to be made more explicit in the action plan, of course you can recommend through to Cabinet that it is such. Thank you.
I didn't see this as a burning issue, but it was just a recommendation which was there and didn't appear in the report. Do we accept Mr. Block's proposal, how we deal with that, that it's a secondary matter rather than a primary matter? Any other comments on page 11? On page 12 of the report, governance and culture, going over onto page 13, there were a set of recommendations which could be important on duplication of effort, the role of scrutiny and diversity. Those are elaborated over on page 13. And again, they don't appear, the removal of duplication, particularly when we've got matrix working, and we're involved in everything, but perhaps we achieve very little on some of the wider projects, particularly those outside the immediate remit of the Borough Council. The matter of scrutiny, in fact, I was asked by the chairman of the LGA panel, why was this review being carried out by the LGA and not by our own scrutiny committee? And my answer there was that it was we didn't have the internal resources. We were a lean organisation, and it was better to have it done independently elsewhere. But they did make a comment on the resources for scrutiny, and they made a more prolonged dialogue on the diversity issues and whether CBC needs to identify a more proactive way of dealing with equality and diversity issues. Colchester's a young and diverse, dynamic community, and it should work to harness that diversity better. And I thought that was perhaps a statement which was bordering on the line where perhaps it should have been considered in the action plan, unless it's considered obliquely in a way which I overlooked.
I mean, absolutely, it's a recommendation picked up within the report, and as I explained earlier, there is a very, very detailed tracker for every word of advice and action identified by the LGA through their peer challenge, which is being tracked. I'd emphasise the response, the action plan is the key recommendations that the peer challenge team themselves felt were the absolutely the most important things for the council to respond to. If the scrutiny panel sees it fit to take a more deeper dive in terms of the more detailed action plan, which I've actually got open in front of me for use by officers, absolutely prepared to bring that to a later meeting. Thank you.
I just think we as a panel need to satisfy ourselves that the mapping from the report to the 8 items in the action plan was absolutely sound, and with your assurances that there is a sort of a catch-all system running below on matters which are important but not sufficiently important to get into the action plan. It is sort of useful to know that.
Chair, would it help if I commit? I mean, this is not a big secret. I'm quite happy to share it's a detailed Excel spreadsheet around the panel following this meeting, so you can, to give you that reassurance that every item identified is being picked up. I think if you would try to scrutinise that tonight, we'd be here for quite some time because of the depth of the advice given, but I'm more than happy to share this following the meeting.
It was purely the borderline cases that I was picking up. I was surprised that there wasn't a placeholder in the action plan in the 8 points picked up from the LGA report. Any other comments, colleagues? There was only one other item on the plan where I think we were in the borderline, and that was on page 10, where it says, finally, the peer team urgently encourages CBC to review the waste service, and goes on with a dialogue. And I couldn't see, and maybe that I was just missing it, I couldn't see anything about the waste service in the action plan. And this was one where it says it urgently encourages CBC, but it's not mapped into the action plan. I just wondered what your view was on that particular statement.
Again, I think hopefully colleagues who are on other panels will be aware that there is a piece of work that's already underway to review our waste strategy. So hopefully that will give you the confidence that particular recommendation is underway in terms of this council's response. Again, if the panel feels that that needs to be added, or any of the recommendations need to be added, of course you can recommend that to cabinet. Thank you.
Sorry. Yes. Are there any other comments, caveats, or worries even about the way we moved from the report to the action plan? And we've heard the explanation. So, Councillor Lissimore.
just coming quickly, just worried, concerned about ownership, to ensure, we are saying that Scrutiny owns perhaps the major points that we're looking at tonight, but I think we've got to make sure that there is a clear ownership of the other points as well, so that they don't sort of drop off.
We're not considering the other issues, the important but not quite so important that they appear in the action plan or are being done anywhere else. We've had the very kind offer that will be circulated. We're not discussing it this evening because we haven't had time to look at it. I think we all welcome the sight of this report. And does that report give ownership of the other items that didn't quite make it onto the action plan?
Absolutely. There's full ownership, and what I did skip across earlier is that the peer challenge team themselves will come back for a follow-up visit. That's scheduled, or will be scheduled, for July, to create a bit of space between May, because of what's happening in many other councils this year. So again, they will come in and provide a follow-up check against all recommendations. I have to emphasize, being a peer challenger myself, they will focus on the key recommendations when they come back, but of course they will look for a general progress in terms of the issues that were found. And again, if the panel wants a future look at this, either after or immediately before, then of course you can put this on your work programme for next municipal year.
Leader.
Chair, thank you. Thank you all for bearing with me. A few minutes late through the door. I just want to sort of say that the spirit in which we go back to the LGA review, the spirit of that was very much open ears by them and us all. We had some really good collective discussions at the time around the emerging conclusions and recommendations on the way ahead. So in a sense, you're checking homework, which we, as much as we can, cross party, had taken a stock of. And that's the spirit in which we have to do this. I consider myself owning this in terms of leadership for the cabinet of the day. When or if I go, another will do the same. So this is collective work. The spirit is going to be collective because of the importance of the LGA review, its independence of nature and the spirit in which it's being conducted. Our success in terms of delivering it will depend very much on us working through this in each of the parts of the structure of the council in the right kind of way, which gives lots of opportunity for scrutiny, Chair, but I absolutely want to sort of make it plain. I'd welcome us coming back as regularly as you're happy to sort of walk through this and to make sure we're declaring this openly and early, which picks up on the point about you may only glance at or need to subsidiary points, but you'd take some comfort. So we had a glance through, and if Richard and the team had done this as we hope, see a load of greens which are greens for done or being done. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. So the offer is there to supply the spreadsheet to us. I think we should wait until we've seen it, and when we've seen it, if any member of the panel wishes to raise it as a work item, we'll do so then. I see no point in putting it on the work programme unless there is sort of serious issues associated that need consideration by the panel. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Yes, I do think, though, the suggestion that the action plan should come back to the panel in the next municipal year would be a very valid one. And I would certainly guidance as to whether it would be best that we look at it before the LGA peer group has come in, or whether it perhaps be best to wait until they've looked at it, because then if they've said 95% of it is fine, we can concentrate on the bits that aren't. I think that's something that we should look at for the next municipal, but clearly that will be a matter for this panel next year rather than us, but perhaps we put it into the work programme.
I think we need to differentiate between a further scrutiny of the action plan and scrutiny of the spreadsheet, which gives the wider findings and suggestions of the panel, but which are not of sufficient import immediately to go on the action plan. And so I think the review of the action plan and its progress, yes, should be a matter of scrutiny. Agree absolutely, but let's look at the the spreadsheet and decide whether it is worthy, whether it needs, or whether it's so obvious that everything has been addressed to our satisfaction. We don't actually need to look at it again. Right, with your permission, colleagues, can we move over to looking at the action plan itself? Rather than dotting around from item to item, I suggest we just go through it item by item, starting on number 1, ending on number 8, then have a brief discussion about any recommendations that we might wish to make to Cabinet. So the first item on the action plan is the focus on city status. And over the page we have components which show the who owns it, the key dates. Richard, do you want to address, is there anything you wish to say on this particular item?
I hope for the panel it's fairly self-explanatory in terms of the proposals. I'd emphasise that as you go through this plan, you will see it's very much underway on the basis that we wouldn't wait until this process before starting to respond to these key recommendations, but happy to take any questions if anything's not clear in terms of the proposed plans to respond.
Can I ask for your view on the difference between point 1 and the later point 3, co-design compelling and long-term place-based narratives, which I have difficulty understanding at times, but the plan says see city status. Is it that the one is to deal with the euphoric reaction of everyone to receiving city status and having a year-long party, but 3 is to do with the serious work of business investment and how we build a program of improvements throughout the whole of the city to the city status. And of course, 3 could well be done without city status, but is perhaps easier to do with city status. I mean, is it possible to just clarify what is the difference between these 2 items? And sorry to jump about onto 3 when I said we were going to consider them one at a time, but I'm not quite sure what the scope and the difference in scope is on these 2 items.
Chair, can I help? I'm looking at the recommendations in the attachment, so the 3 points: civic, year of celebration, and legacy. As I find that's the easiest thing to look at, and does give you the same timeline. But the latter of the 3 is the beginning of the journey. And I'll speak to this because I've listened to both the policy panel twice on this very usefully, and spoke to members. Darius, you and I keep having some really good conversations on this. Individual members. And last week I chaired, if we can call it that such, it's not board of boards in which we've drawn together some of the circles that we work with, the voluntary sector, town deal board, and the bid, to look at how we can work together. And we've got a way ahead, which is going to be, as a shorthand, those organisations or those groupings coordinated together with the council leadership of the day, and the ambassadors that, for those who know them better than I might, have been a resource intermittently used, I think it'd be fair to say, to make the most of what the city has to offer and to add their own personal weight to that. And so there is a distinct difference, but the 2 are linked in a very clear way. And I guess we all will see this. The celebration and commemoration, a long conversation with the policy panel, but a fair one, is all about ensuring that we have a sense of our place in this coming year, whereas the transition to and the work that's already underway on marketing the city can use some of those opportunities and add some extra weight and impetus to them in a more joined up way than we do. You know, look up Colchester and find which website or which app you want to find. You know, we've got to work together in a more coherent way, and we're looking at what that might mean. So we're looking at the spectrum of needs across the city, alive to what we're already doing, and we're going to add some weight to it. And we know the evidence is clear that city status, which is why some around this table, all of us, I think, supported it as we did, and we're so pleased. City status adds extra sense of place. And that's been really distinct in talking to those across the UK, like the Key Cities Network, who are making the most of that standing. Gives you an extra strength of voice collectively and individually as a city in the places we have to work with. Now, respect translates, we hope, to investment and then to a social, a well-being, a health and equalities return. That will take some time, but that's the distinction. So groundwork, foundation, and an opportunity to celebrate the city on the one hand, and deep work, which should take some time to develop and deliver, which is well underway. And if you repeat one thing from it, it would be the two come together and your ability to market a distinctive place, which is what Colchester is.
But eventually everything comes together. And the difference between the projects is just a difference in sort of style and approach to achieve an overall strategic objective.
Absolutely
So
correct.
they're all coming together as a pinnacle, but we need to be able to identify what are the components of each individual item in the action plan and what is being done. And I sense that the hard sell, the bringing in of prospective employers, the prospectus to market Colchester and its opportunities to prospective employers is not really under item one. Item one is more about the public relations, the establishing the right mental framework of the city to proceed, rather than the actual doing of or the hard sell of the city to prospective employers. And there was a throwaway line in the report, you know, the city needs to clarify just what industries it wants to bring in, what industries it wants to see new and prospering in the city. And do we assume that those go into three rather than into the definition of one?
I do, but I see a continuation in the way that you've described it, Chair. And we have to have a kind of a groundedness about this as well, which is illustrated by a high quality, in my view, economic strategy and report assessment, which has just been signed off internally, which sets out our strengths, our areas of possibility, and the city from an economic perspective. But we have a really good track record here. But it would be foolish for any one of us to say tomorrow will be the day in which we say City Award delivers in those medium to longer term prospects. What we do know, I'll repeat, it's clear that what you can do with that marketing and bringing about that realization, that connection, and turn it into change is enhanced by having a city status. And is the really big difference for me visibly by seeing that people who might not have walked forward to have conversations around what they can do to make the most of the opportunity now are doing that. So we had a really good quality conversation with the ambassadors. We had a really good quality conversation with people offering to contribute time and resource as well as their expertise. Just a week or so ago with that board of boards, when we had some of the leaders in business, some of our leading ambassadors as well. And I can only say what's been said, but what you will see, what we will have to answer to over time will be the progress made. But the declaration, and it's only January 23, the declaration is clear and has substance.
But entertaining the chairman of FTSE 100 companies and telling them about the advantages of setting up base in Colchester, I mean, that has not been done, and that is not envisaged under item 1 of the action plan.
At the summary of the action plan, but the right projects will sit in the right place. The visibility of them you'd expect will bring to this place or elsewhere.
Colleagues, are there any observations on the project definition for item 1 on the action plan.
Just a couple of questions. One is under the Euro celebration. Is the big siege event going ahead this year? I take it that's the Civil War battle, or I'm looking forward to a battle.
I know Councillor Liddy likes a good battle. Yes, yes, it is.
Okay, another one's a bit more serious. And as ever, it's legacy long-term placemaking. You hope to bring the city status to parish areas, but what exactly is benefit to somewhere like Row Edge or East Donald and Mansfield? To that, I suggest nothing really. Now, the only thing I'd look forward to would be if city status actually sped up devolution and we could break away from the higher city council now and have our own budgets and do what we like to look after ourselves. But am I just dreaming still?
I like a good challenge, Chair. Well, the oppression of the city of Colchester, I hope, is not felt by too many, but it is a very fair point made and accepted that what we have to do, and one of the things we've agreed to do is a deep consultation and a deep engagement beyond the city centre. So one of the things we're all clear about is we can't just think city centre in the narrow sense of just beyond here, that we've got to be thinking of actually a number of urban city centres here and Stanway Tollgate and Northern Gateway as it develops, and that we absolutely must not forget the richness that different parts of the wider Colchester have to offer, including Hedge and Tiptree and Wivenhoe and so on. So part of the engagement process will be to do this, but a short answer to your question would be, at the very least, there is opportunity given. If there is more being done in the city, if more jobs are available over time, and a richness to those jobs and opportunities they bring to individuals and their families, then that and the connection that some of the investments we're doing, as you all know, all of that comes together to make this a better place. That phrase we keep using because it's true: live, work, and visit. But you make a point that we absolutely get, that at the end of this process, as we work through it, we need to be having the cross check. What are we doing? For whom? With whom? And where?
That's okay, Councillor. Yeah, Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Yes, I was encouraged by what the leader said there, and I think tourism side in particular, the fact that we have city status, that there will be additional publicity about that, will be of great benefit to some of the other areas. I mean, I do have a couple of guest houses in my ward, but I'm guessing that the massage of people coming in are not, unfortunately, going to want to spend their time going around St John's shops and the St Anne's estate. However, Row Hedge, with its riverfront settings and what have you, would, I think, benefit a great deal more from people coming into the town. And indeed, areas in rural north would do extremely well out of that. Not to mention the Tiptree Jam Factory, which also might, again, benefit from the extra footfall that's coming in. So I think this is a good opportunity to benefit the whole of the area. And of course, by having more industry and better paid jobs, that again is going to benefit everyone, including those living in areas like Row Hedge and indeed the St Anne's estate, which could definitely do with some of the investment and improved jobs that we're seeing. So I thank you for that.
Councillor Laws, speaking of rural North Ward.
This is all about the opportunity of shining a spotlight, isn't it, on what Colchester is about. I think the really important point here about the comms work that will need to be done cannot be talked about enough, really. We've made some mistakes in the past. I think we all know that the inception of the purple signs was done in a fashion that some people didn't like the wording on it, some people didn't like the locations of them, and they were put up whilst we still have, they're still up there now, big white signs that point out that we're Britain's oldest recorded town. And you know, this it's difficult because I know that we've got limited resources, but we do have an opportunity to get strategic about the optics, the signage, and the marketing thereof. And also we had a little bit of controversy when we had the tag Britain's first city. Some people didn't like that at the time. Some people said we should have put the word Roman in there. Some people still hold on to the oldest recorded town thing. Obviously, there's no dispute of that, but we have a new opportunity. So I think that's a really important piece of work. And I understand why the action plan has listed the lead officers to do that work, but I would just hope, and I'm saying this so that the leader and Richard Coe can hear this, I hope that within that work, we make sure that Visit Colchester are in that room. We make sure that probably even the High Steward and other civic-minded people have an input, because I think we do have to try and take people with us a little bit on some of this in order for it to land better. And if it is the case that we don't have the resource to unveil lovely new shiny signage that is universally approved of by everyone, we just need to tell people when it's going to happen and how it's going to happen, so that people can look forward to it. And also behind the scenes, of course, there is some other opportunities that are underway. We have a master plan which makes specific reference to the opportunities around the Roman city wall. We have planning, who are looking at an SPD around what to do if you find Roman surfaces in new developments, which you will find in the Roman walls in Old Colchester. So there's loads of good stuff there, and I welcome it. I think we're going in the right direction. We've got to take people with us. So I think it's about making sure that everyone's involved. And just final point, sorry for waffling on, under Year of Celebration, I get that this has been through lots of conversations and we're doing the Siege event, that's fine. But I would just politely point out that, you know, there is a reason why we know that York is synonymous with the Vikings, because a big effort was made some 40, 50 years ago to focus on that. And I know that some people will say, Darius, it's more than just about the Romans. I know, but it is our USP. So I think that there is a risk sometimes that if you try and sort of say, well, you know, we're big in the medieval time, and of course we've still got Withen, who the Vikings were there. I don't know if they made it over to Rowhedge, Mike, but actually it is the Romans that is unique for Colchester. And we're only 20 years away from a 2000-year anniversary of when they first arrived here. So there's great opportunities here. I just want to make sure that we take people with us.
Thank you. Yes, I just wondered if we're going to look into other towns that have become cities, particularly Chelmsford, to see what worked for them and what has not worked for them. There is a legacy of a number of towns becoming cities, you know, over the last sort of 20 years. So it would be really interesting to see what has worked for them.
If I may, Chair, absolutely. We've as soon as we found out, we were in contact with others, starting in Essex, obviously, with Chelmsford, and also more recently Southend. So absolutely. I just wanted to also emphasise that as you go through this action plan, these kind of actions are huge. I mean, city status as a piece of work is massive, and what you're seeing is very much kind of a summary for the purposes of the kind of response for the peer challenge as a recommendation. But I have no doubt you will see more detail as these pieces of work are kind of developed further. And indeed, again, I'd encourage you to map out where there are pieces of work that aren't on your work programme, where you think the panel really should have some oversight, not just the peer challenge action plan per se, but specific items that are really so important. And my understanding is I think you may have city status already on your work programme for the future. Thank you.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. I do think there are some missed opportunities here. So we talk about signage, and I guess it's what type of signage there is, because there's lots of different signage. It'd be interesting to see what work we've done with Greater Anglia. So when you come into Colchester, the signs just say Colchester. When you go into Chelmsford, they say home of Anglia Ruskin University, which isn't the greatest university. However, we could have Colchester, Britain's first city, Britain's newest city. Could that be some signage we could get there? But also coming out of the station, there is still no signage telling you which way to go to town. Is this something we can work with Greater Anglia on again? Telling you come out of that station, if you do not know Colchester, you do not have a clue where you're going. And I do get people ask me which way is the town centre. So I think that's an opportunity there, working with them and partnership work. And also there's no mention on here about how we get people to these areas like Rowhedge, Dedham, Wivenhoe around public transport. So what would be really good to see is Colchester Borough Council working much closer with Essex County Council and the bus companies about how we can push this. Because getting to Rowhedge, we now only have an hourly bus. It's a bit of a nightmare getting there. If you miss your bus, you're stuck there for a while. Luckily, there's some good pubs. Similar with Dedham, similar with West Burgoll. How do you get there? How do we encourage more people to go to these great places we have to offer, or to the guest houses of St John's? How do they get there and get back if they want to after? So I think that would be something that I'd like to see. That definitely fits with our economy, but also looking at what we want from our future bus services and a way of building a stronger partnership with them, because I don't think that's been there at a local level.
Richard. Oh, so Richard Block, were you? Sorry, I thought you were going to answer. Leader, going to answer.
Perhaps I might. I just want to acknowledge all the points made. The reality is that some will be, you will understand this, Lee, more difficult. Change the buses. Heavens, how many times we had that conversation? We still need to have it. And of course, in our future city timeline, the RTS is going to be a huge contribution, and that and some transformational change intents around buses. Did-you-go, I think it is. Oh, I might have got that wrong. Yeah, that ability to call up in a different kind of way a service, rather than wait for the 1 hour away double decker with 3 people on it. You know, there is change in prospect, and we've got county council conversations to have on another place. But I am alive to these points. They're fairly made, as was yours earlier about USP and both of you signage. And we'll take this away to see what we can. I've made a foolish pledge to have a crack at, in the best sense, you know, Greater Anglia, and see what progress we can make. So thank you. We'll do what we can. The point made earlier about the key thrust of this point and others is we're going to have to focus on what matters most and do what else we can. Working with partners will magnify, which is your point to a degree, I may say, as I hear it, will magnify our ability to make a change. That's where you actually get more resource. That marketing point is a key one. So let me stray offline a little bit, but I've made the point to my colleagues, which is, why is there no Colchester app? We have half a dozen websites across Colchester, and they're honourable places to go and they're good information, but the ability to point people, you know, in a way, where to go, we're going to have to work at that. It won't be done by us here. You'll be pleased to know it will be done by some good people from marketing companies in the city. So we will make progress. So hold us to account, but I ask you to give us some space to set the magnitude, as Richard said, of what we're setting about doing.
And on the point of public transport, that is one of the ones which I believe fits better into Project 3, co-design a compelling and long-term place-based narrative city vision. You know, the public transport for the city doesn't really depend upon city status. It needs doing regardless of whether we have city status, which is sort of what I saw as the fine differentiation between projects 1 and projects 3. But you had another point on.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, it will be difficult, but just because something's difficult doesn't mean we should do it. Otherwise, we wouldn't have done the waste changes we did all those years ago. Second point on the app is we could also look at what other cities have done and towns. Is you have a card, so you can have a Colchester card, and it encourages you to go to all the certain places. So you pay £30 for it, for example, you get free entry to all these certain places, you get discounts in shops, you get a map with it, and it encourages you over a weekend to visit certain areas. And hopefully people take that map home and go, next year we'll come back to Colchester and do all the wonderful things we didn't do last time. So just another idea to throw in the ring there to get people coming back, because we want them to have a good experience and spend their money again.
Councillor Lilly.
Yeah, it's sort of, it's ideal really. When I went to Dublin for a few days, a few years ago, I managed to sign up. I looked at what was available, and they did bus trips out and about into the countryside. Some were embarrassing, being English, because it was to the city of Drogheda, where a big battle took place. The Americans loved it, but it was really nice to go somewhere and pick up a bus we could have, and perhaps park and ride, as Mr. Trick here, that they could do bus trips to Dedham, Langan, Levenworth, Blairmani, all around the area. And that's how it should be. And as a tourist, you would look at that, base yourselves in the city centre, so you could pop along to the pub at night time. And I found Dublin not as good as Galway myself. There was too many English people in there for my liking on stag nights. It ruined it for me, but that was the way forward, I believe. And get back to Darius' point, the reason why most of us are at the Civil War in Roe Hedge, the Romans rode past Roe Hedge and went up further and settled there. So we took great umbrage at this great snub. But the Royalists or the Cavaliers, they managed to land at the Hive and have a good battle down there and at a camp. So
Goodo, and I think we will reenact it. We will fire our musket balls into the Priory and see whether we can damage yet more of a scheduled ancient monument. Yes, okay. Yeah, okay. Now, on this particular project, we've lots of ideas, and clearly the council needs lots of ideas. But what we have to decide as a scrutiny panel, can all these spiffingly good ideas we've been talking about be shoehorned into the three major topics that Mr. Block has put on his report this evening? Because if they can, then we can say, yes, this project is okay and serves its purpose. If there are issues about city status which don't neatly fit into any of these overall descriptions, then it's worth considering whether we should be drawing that to the attention of the Cabinet. I personally don't think I've heard anything. I've had lots of whizzo ideas, things that we must surely do to make Colchester great. But I think they all fit into the 3 points which we have on the order paper. Yep, is that agreed? So we have no recommendations to Cabinet on project one. It's complete, it has target dates, it has owners, and it seems very sensible, it seems very needy, and it's reassuring to hear the leader saying that most of it is ongoing already. We then move on to project two, which has a much firmer grip. It now has a firmer history because of all the action which has been going on the capital programme. But would you like to introduce it, either leader or Richard Block?
If you let me, this is a personal passion of mine. Like others, saw some weaknesses amongst our many strengths of the way in which we have an ambition which reflects itself in a willingness to invest through capital projects of some real significance. And one of the conversations we've had this week in leadership and cabinet has been just to look at where we stand compared to other places of a similar size and significance. And the answer is, and we had some peer reviewers amongst the circle, we do much more than many. And I sort of start this conversation, if I may, on that basis. Doing much more than many serves your social good, it serves your destination good, and it serves employment and other opportunities for the residents of Colchester as a still growing city. But you have to manage well. It was one of the easiest things to agree with the LGA, that we knew we weren't where we needed to be. We've seen some signs of this in slippage in brought to this place or going through through governance and audit. You could see slippage on program spend and time and timeline and on cost on delivery. The factors that have created that have been compounded by the pandemic. So it was widely known that we were needing a really stop still and hard review to get the kind of grip we needed. The LGA played that back to us as its nature part of the review. So what I would add to that is that clarity is that we've had the first feedback session to cabinet, informal cabinet this last week. And Richard won't mind me saying we spoke about what we expected to have, and it touches on Councillor Sonic's remarks to a certain degree. Have to have a clarity of visibility around a project line to be able to take a judgment of it. So what is it for? What is it about? What will it deliver? How much is it expected to cost? What's your funding envelope? How much contingency have you got? The kind of breakdown to understand that gives you the ability to make a solid judgment that has been there but hasn't always been visible. And if it's not always visible, it's much more difficult to take a judgment, either whether you're in cabinet, portfolio holder, or if you go through governance and audit or here. There's more words than you need, but it's just to say that that point of principle absolutely is accepted, and a robust, I mean, I found it impressive work. It's just not ready to share with you, share it as soon as we're able here on GNA, but an impressive review framework and a really good start's been made. I have to hold myself steady and say to you what I said to the team, which is as soon as we can, please, but you have to wait until that review is complete. I have to, so therefore we as colleagues have to, but we are well on the way. And the spirit and the approach, the technical approach, which is what will matter, is the right kind. And we all say what we've done. Well, I've done this stuff before, so it doesn't mean I get it right, but it does mean I know what we should have. So we're now looking at this in the kind of way that we should, that will give you and give us the kind of competence we want. So we know what we're getting into, we know where we are, and we have a better sense of the risks and issues and the breadth, the envelope in which we've got to operate. One last thing I'd say, and you, Richard, might want to add to this, is I've asked the question you would ask, which is, having looked across the piece, being part of the way through, should we, because it's been one of those stories running, and we've got a Thurrock. And with every respect to our colleagues, they absolutely know. You know, the feedback is we've got some very well run projects. We've got some other projects over which there were naturally changing circumstances, be some questions to address. We have to make sure that all that comes together in a way that's cohesive and defensible. But no, actually, it's actually pretty solid. We just at the right time to do the right kind of review and then to restart afresh.
Well, this project is in a very different state from the former bond, which just had general headings. And as the panel identified, there were lots of issues which could be shoehorned into each particular item. In this project, we have a substantial project framework, not completed by any means, but the definition of the project is complete and it's well understood, and we know where the resources are going. So where the last one was a bit on the light side, this project is well defined, the intentions are very clear, the timescales and the resources are also equally clear. So it's, I think this is also a project which we may well comment on the seriousness of the issue, but in terms of the project being well placed in the action plan and the appropriate response from Cabinet to ensure that that essential work moves ahead with speed. There is very much assurance coming from the report. Did you have anything to add on this, Richard?
Nothing really to add in terms of the kind of the detail of the response. Only to say that I think probably the biggest learning point for officers is that kind of oversight point for members and reassurance. We need to do that a lot better and make sure that the relevant panels and cabinet actually can see that there is a firm grip, and as Councillor King has outlined, you know, we're not a Thurrock. Our projects are controlled, but I accept that point. We need to give you that reassurance and oversight. We need to do that better.
If I may, there's one extra point. It's implied, but maybe not clear here. And that's fair enough. We now are clear that the project management resource that's been available to run this has been too thin. the service provided, whether it's financial insight, estimating, and sort of capacity assistance from CTC to, for example, CCHL has not been enough. They've not, and our resources are being spread. So there is an organisational piece here that your programme management office, in whatever form it ends up being, one of the things for us collectively to test will be, with every respect, one man and the proverbial dog, or is it richer than that? It needs to be richer than that. It needs to be charged. They need to be people clearly of quality, but not people spread in different organisations without the connection that they need to be effective. So there will be, to underpin this, the challenge that I'm giving, and Richard and would agree, is about ensuring when we come out of this, not only do we know we're scrubbed, we know where we're at, we know what to do or not to do, we have that background of confidence that's just been described by Richard as well. We also know what we need to do to make sure it stays in that proper place. So you've got proper resource to task.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I fully agree with you. I think this is a very well worked action plan we've got here. I'm particularly pleased that the date's working well with the budget cycle. So the review will be completed by the end of January in time for this year's budget, rather than let it go. What I would also say is that from the government's and audit side, the other points that we picked up on was the impact of rising interest rates and inflation. Both of those would impact on the viability of any project. And so when this review takes place, it would be my expectation that we will end up with a smaller capital programme, because quite frankly, with interest rates having gone from virtually nothing to 5%, a number of projects will no longer be financially viable. I think this comes back to Councillor Sunnock's point as well, and that will cause some pain. And I hope that as a council, we can take this in a mature way and not have the situation that we saw in Highwoods recently, where the fact that projects were being reviewed was portrayed as projects being cancelled, which was clearly not the case. So I think this is a really good example of the action plan I'm fully endorsing.
Any other comments? So we agree that this is a well-defined, clearly understood project on which already a substantial amount of effort has been put in to ensure that it goes in the right direction. So we have no comments on this particular item.
Sorry, Chair, I think we actually would congratulate them on the action plan on this item. I think this is exactly what we want to see. I'll actually be a little bit positive.
Whether it's well-defined ownership and timescales, but whether we're going to congratulate Cabinet and those projects which we don't congratulate Cabinet, will that be a poor mark? But yes, okay, we can congratulate Cabinet.
I think it is a very negative view to take, that if you are told you've done a good piece of work, you therefore feel disenfranchised if you're not told that the next piece of work is equally brilliant. Because I do remember I had a teacher once who seemed to think that everything I did was brilliant, and then the end of the year results proved quite disappointing.
You get the pitfalls in one go, Councillor Smith. Thank you. We now move on to number 3 in the list, which is in great contrast to number 2, co-design a compelling and long-term place-based narrative vision to define Colchester's future. I think I know what it means, and I think earlier on I suggested a possible differentiation of the understanding between the projects. I felt that the plan and the achievements, just to say it's part of city status, really undersold what needs to be done in terms of producing a place-based narrative and vision for the city. Certainly, the city status project will input into this, but there's so much more, as Councillor Scordis pointed out, just the public transport issues, whether or not they're part of the city status work, are absolutely essential work which need to fall under this particular definition. And I think it has been dismissed all too easily. And perhaps there should be a far clearer indication of what are the longer term place-based issues that should go in there. Many of them will be defined in the future strategic plan, but at least we might have a summary of what to expect, because this, after all, is a fairly short-term response to the LGA, rather than defining the long-term plan and the strategy itself. Leader, you are gesticulating.
Fond of doing that, Chair. Thank you. I just want to set the point. I think it's well made. We need to look at the balance between the conversation we just had on item 1 and item 3. I think as much as anything else, this item acknowledges that we're into the process of a new strategic plan, which actually, having had at least one good review at that, will, and rightly so, largely reflect the essence that we agree between us across chamber for the last strategic plan, because the things that were important then are still important now. So there is something about, for me, in us taking away the point and seeing what we can do to bring out the balance between the new strategic plan, that legacy connection, and see where it best fits, and look to see what we might be. It's back to the project definition challenge, what kind of outcomes we might be expecting against this particular timeline. So I'm very happy to take further comments, but I think this conversation alone has been very good. Such as Richard's view, been very helpful.
I'd reiterate what Councillor King has said, and hey, this is why we have pre-scrutiny, isn't it? So that you can provide constructive comments to be able to kind of get a better quality outcome. So the discussion we had about city status, where I think you helped, made quite a few helpful comments for this particular recommendation as well, we'll take on board. So yeah, thank you.
And Chair, if I may, there's also, looking down the list here of all the important things we think about, and Darius, you touched on it earlier, master planning for the city centre. This is a place, when we talk about place, having that's emerging, it's exciting if we can make it happen. Seeing some sense of that captured here, although the work today is going to be challenging but good to deliver over time, having some sense of that here also, I think, would help enrich this particular item. So I'm really grateful for the conversation. It's helpful.
So on this one, we will send a note to, although of course clearly Leader already knows and he will take it away, but we will just formalise it with a brief note saying that we believe there should be a greater definition linking to the strategic plan, linking to the legacy connections and master planning, which should be within the definition of the compelling place-based narrative. Is that agreed? Thank you, colleagues. We now move on to number 4, strengthen the city's political and officer leaders of place roles and look beyond Colchester map to anchor the institution's partners and stakeholders. And again, this is rather a light definition of the plan and detailed plan and achievement. This has been added as a standing item for consideration and discussion at each senior leadership board meeting. Full analysis and map of stakeholders will also be undertaken. That to me does not seem like a self-contained sub-project. Although it could probably be built out into such by adding some of the necessary detail that would need to be added. And it also is owned by a board rather than by an individual. And my personal view, whether or not colleagues share it, I don't know, is we'd like to have these issues with a particular individual so that at some time in the future, if we need to look at it again, we know who is responsible personally for making this happen in the city, rather than having a nebulous committee that we can't nail to the floor. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Yes. The other aspect of this, I think we cover the officer leaders in place role fairly well through the senior leadership board, but I don't think we're addressing the issue with individual councillors who are not in the cabinet. And I don't think the intention was that this was a role that only related to members who are in the cabinet, but should also relate to members everywhere, whether they are in the administration or not, because as a councillor for a ward, you have a role of political leadership in that area. And I think we should be putting something in the action plan relating to that aspect of it as well.
Richard.
If I may, Chair, again, useful comments. Thank you. To emphasise, I think in the action plan. So again, you may wish to recommend some amendments, but I mean this action is very much a kind of first step. The full analysis and map of stakeholders. You kind of need to understand, and you may say that it's fairly obvious for yourselves who the key individuals are and groups who you need to influence as ward councillors. But we kind of, the Peer Challenge team's point is that you've got a lot of people who you need to influence, and you need to just kind of work out where you're spending the time in terms of stakeholders. So actually have a look, particularly cabinet and officers, have a look at where you're spending your time, identify those groups and individuals who are key to the kind of future of Colchester, particularly linking to your strategic plan, and make sure you're actually spending the right time with those groups and individuals. So almost the map is the first step to actually identify then what you're going to do.
The map itself doesn't actually lead to the strengthening process. The map just guides us to the priorities of which relationships should be strengthened, which stakeholders and partners need to be in a closer relationship with the city council and the councillors. So yeah, is it possible to lead off with the map and then just have another statement on where that goes and how the strengthening process is going to take place?
If I may,
Leader.
just again welcome that constructive challenge, because that's exactly right, isn't it? If we have a map, now what? There is one extra point, I think, or two, if I may briefly. The first is that this should have leadership at political level, is a point well made. Now, whether it gets complicated at one level, all we do influences the reputation and sometimes the delivery of the council, but probably in practical terms, we should pick a cabinet member, or sometimes it should be the leader when that's of the day, whenever that's appropriate. So this version, and Richard and I have had a few goes at this, will have its own minor evolutions, and that will be one that will be clear politically. So in terms of accountability, who the conversation should be, who that lead might be, might change, but it should all be held together by me or whoever follows me in this role. Second thing to say is that it's a really interesting twist, and some of you might remember it, when the LGA was saying, look, you're a great place, and you're not looking at yourself as clearly as we are. You're a great place with real challenges, but real possibilities. When you're a city, you play on a different stage. And that part of this, behind this, was to say, okay, how does that work? So one step already taken is to join that wider network I mentioned of key cities, who, for those who glance at it, actually quite an interesting bundle from Norwich to Salford, well, to Reading, which some didn't like, to here. Those cities all have their own qualities, but their collective policy making influence is not to be underestimated in the bureaucratic world we have to live in. But there's also that international piece. Investors and people interested, not just as individuals, but as organisations and companies, and look at cities first. And here's the truth: even the best of towns, like we have been to recently, second. And it's how do we make the most of that? How do we play internationally? So it's no more than a starter to reinforce, but one obvious illustration of this, you all will recognise the University of Essex. Now, the strength of that relationship, their international aspirations and realities of how they stand, that's something that we're going to be working on to make sure we do yet better together. So thank you for the prompt, but just to round it out, that's why this could matter. Yeah, thank you.
Colleagues, are there any further observations? I think the explanation given in the précis form is just what should be added to provide the proper substance and what the achievements will be when the mapping has been done. So if we can add that to our list of recommendations. Any further comments on that? So we move on to number 5. Review our priorities and projects, refocus on delivering a brilliant business as usual, and strengthen our corporate resources. And the plan and achievements, the references the new strategic plan, define brilliant business as usual through and gives a process by means which it should be done, and further detail about how it will impact on projects and priorities and the tests and the linking into the business cases. So that seems a fairly explicit expansion of the plan and the achievements that are to be produced. Falls well into the bailiwick of the Chief Operations Officer.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add, this panel will have an opportunity to review the budget papers and the associated proposed new strategic plan objectives. And this is very much keep this recommendation in mind, I think, when you're considering that, because this has been quite a challenging set of circumstances to both set a new strategic plan and a budget. And we really do need to take stock of the peer challenge team's recommendations in terms of having a level of business that is kind of commensurate to the resources we've got available, and both financial and staff. So I just ask the panel keeps this recommendation in mind when you're considering those papers. Thank you.
Should we be mentioning in number 5 the advantages of the linkage between the budget and the strategic plan, because there has been work going on in that area, and that seems a particularly good outcome if it can be achieved under item 5 or under any other item, come to think of it, but it fits neatly under that one.
I know that we take that point. Go back one, the point that Richard's making is we get that. So you're saying to us we should say it. So you could change the third bullet point to make it plain that available capacity to deliver. It could be available capacity and resources. Sometimes they are slightly different. But that's what's driving this, as the LGA recommended that we should. And it's going to lead to, and I say this ahead of that conversation we'll have in a week or so's time, will be to deliver a overarching strategic plan that doesn't give you 140 things to look at, but says we will be developing in the next months a delivery plan that does fit the resources agreed by this local authority. So it will be rather different. The overarching nature of it will not be, the ambition will not be, but we're not going to, in following the LGA's advice and our own collective views, we're not going to be committing to things we haven't got a good prospect to deliver in.
Colleagues, any points, any comments? So we accept that one with the added comments about the delivery of or the linkage of the strategic plan and the budget. Moving on to item 6, which is a matter which is close to the hearts of many members, strongly, and I mean that is always a good start for any action plan. Strongly consider whether changing your election cycle will help achieve our goals, ambitions, and deliver improved services for Colchester's communities. And then there's in the plan and achievements, a reference to the recent motion at full council with cross-party support to look at what can be done in what time scale. Any comments on that, colleagues?
The only thing, Chair, was we've got our first meeting next month on that. So yeah, that's already heading in the right direction. It's on the way.
Yeah.
We're all keeping an open mind.
I've always loved your sense of humour, guys.
So I sense that the panel. Oh, Councillor Listenall.
Sorry, can I just ask about the timings here? So it's saying full council motion considered by the 1st of December. How does that affect what are sort of the deadlines that we need to be looking at with regards to the turnaround and when we need to implement this if a decision is decided to change to an all-out system? Does that delay it? This is what I'm saying.
The date, I think the date is not quite correct. That date reflects when we did have the motion, we did agree what we were going to do, I think. There is a timetable that does exist, has been walked through. We can make sure that that is added, because I think we do need to have that looking forward. So,
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, on your point, Sue, I think the key item is going to be the boundary review, because clearly there wouldn't be any point in changing before the boundary review and having a situation where you have all up elections for 1 year and then a boundary review and then you have, so I think our timescales are probably going to be driven more by what the Boundary Commission can do now, and which was something which when we started this project we didn't know was going to happen, but now we know that the Boundary Commission are going to be visiting us at some stage. I don't think we have any firm dates on what their timescales are yet, do we?
I did have some dates, but they were more like there was a suggestion of dates this summer. I know there's been some conversations to be had, and back to your point, Sue, about timeline, I still think we can change this in an open way, reflecting what you just said, Paul, Councillor Smith, about the fact that that is a constraint in practical terms. So I think we can take away the wording of the report, if that's okay, Richard, and just certainly the timeline. Thank you.
So we ask that, or we suggest to Cabinet that the Boundary Commission is of sufficient import in the context of this particular project, that there should be a mention of it in the plans and achievements. We're making progress. Item 7. Better define with our staff what hybrid working means for CCC, not CBC anymore, and provide a clear definition, and then go on to clarify how it's going to work in communication plan. Then in the plan and achievements, hybrid working guidance incorporated into the hub guidance and so on. Do you wish to add anything to the context of this project? It's reasonably well defined, what's going to happen, what the major underlying tasks are going to be, and a target date of the 31st of the 3rd.
I need to apologise for the one acronym that you probably wouldn't understand, which is the SUN group. Apologies for that. The SUN group is our Speak Up Now group, and it's our representative group for staff from across the whole council at all levels, and it gives staff a voice to be able to kind of shape key issues for them. So it's a group we use to kind of engage with on this type of activity.
Raw, I think, is the answer to that. I have no points. It seems a well-defined project, meets the tests. So no comment on 7. Then that brings us on to the last item, which is to commission an independent review of Colchester Commercial Holdings Limited and its subsidiaries, undertake an internal review of Colchester Borough Homes to assess whether the companies are realising the benefits that we expected of them. And in the plans and achievements, there are the corresponding things. They carry out a review of CBH, carry out a review of CCHL. And that seems to summarise. And there's a recommendation, there's a plan which puts those two things into practice, and it's difficult to go much further than that at the moment. Any discussion on this, colleagues?
I'll just have a quick plug for the meeting we're doing tomorrow night in Governance and Audit that's looking at the CCHL situation. It is a closed meeting, but of course, all councillors are very welcome to attend. And I understand that quite a number will be. I just thought I'd put an ad in.
And in balance of the review for CBH has also progressed well. So both of those are clearly covered. I don't think we need to say any more on those unless colleagues are particularly keen.
Well, the only thing I should say that, of course, when we're in a position of having gathered the facts, so we're that awkward place of part of the way through, when we've got that together and we can look and talk to those affected, so the organisations themselves, so I can talk to the spirit of this will be independent review. Obviously, cabinet and leadership and portfolio holders will have their observations. That's part of the mix. But it's really important that we carry forward whatever are the changes in the future in a way that the organisations and the staff understand, feel comfortable with as much as the circumstances allow, and in a way that works. This is one thing I will keep stressing for the overall health of Colchester Council and its sister organisations. So it's not any one part. And so out of this will be some adjustments, I'm sure, that will make for greater strength, greater connection, and greater sort of collective reliance on each other and what we can do for each other. So I'm really looking forward to this. I apologise that being midway is not right, fair on individuals or organisations to share more than that, but it's a promise that in that spirit we will be sharing this when we can, and that when we get into February, then the steps we take will be ones that we will make public and be happy to set and test and challenge on.
But in terms of the project definition, there's some clear recommendation, a clear set of actions in terms of plans and achievements, which fully meet the object of the recommendations. So we can always prejudge what's going to happen in any of these projects, but in terms of the issues we're looking at this evening, there's a clear definition, a clear ownership, dates have been set. So the major tests of I think have been fulfilled if we all agree on that. Okay, thank you. And that brings us to the end of the action plan. We have, as we went through, we had a number of recommendations that on action plan item 3, there should be reference to the strategic plan, the legacy connections and master planning. On 4, we would like to see some reference to the roles of councillors, the strengths, the mapping of the stakeholders as the initial point. On 5, we would like to see linkage of the strategic plan and the budget highlighted, because that's a sort of important issue. And on 6, the inclusion of the boundary review as another essential milestone, which need to be included in the achievements. So is it agreed that that our clerk will put those into sort of sensible English and produce a minute which I would suggest goes to the chairman and the group spokespersons first. And if we're happy with the language and the terminology, because clearly it's not been actually drafted this evening. If we agree, then that will go forward to as our recommendations to cabinet. Well, thank you for your help and assistance on that item. Remaining on this evening's agenda is the work programme. Thank you, Lee, for your help and assistance. There have been no suggestions that any items should be added, so nothing to be added to the work programme. Are we aware of any items which are seriously slipped? Owen, before he went elsewhere, was fairly confident that the remainder of the year was now achievable in terms of delivering the projects to the committee panel. So we're happy with the work programme? No changes being suggested. So that brings us to the end of the meeting. Can I give your attendance this evening in what was quite a challenging agenda, and I think we've done what was needed, and I thank you. Safe journey home. Well,